Good morning, and welcome to this special presentation for sworn members of American local law enforcement on terrorist attack tactics and techniques. My name is Howard Linett. I'm a Connecticut Yankee who spent more than half his adult life living in Jerusalem, Israel. I'm a practicing attorney, I'm a working journalist, and I'm an Israeli police civil guard sergeant major and sniper instructor. I've got a background in explosives from the Israeli Defense Forces, and I'm the author of Living with Terrorism, Survival Lessons from the Streets of Jerusalem. Okay? What's most important for you to know about me is that for the last 10 years, my wife, 2 daughters, and I have been residents of northernmost Jerusalem. Welcome to my neighborhood. You've just watched a few clips from a home video taken a few minutes after a homicide-suicide bomber ran out from among those pilings and blew himself up between the bus and those 2 taxis. You saw what was left of them. Now, the attack took place at the French Hill interchange. That's about a 3-minute drive from my house. That interchange and the area within a minute's drive around it has been the scene of over 20 terrorist attacks of various kinds. And many of those attacks I'm going to be using this morning in this presentation. Now, my goal for the next several hours is to heighten your consciousness, raise your level of awareness, and kindle within you a survival instinct for terrorist attacks. But first, you have to adopt a new frame of mind. You're no longer crime fighters. You're counter-terrorists. And the difference is not semantics, it's life and death. Criminals crave anonymity. They work hard at being and remaining nameless and faceless. They want to do their crime and they want to get away clean. They don't want to spend the rest of their life in hiding, always looking over a shoulder. Criminals confronted with a choice between capture or a bullet will overwhelmingly opt for a jail cell rather than the grave. Terrorists crave the spotlight, achieving the simultaneous, live, continuous broadcast coverage of their attack on every TV news network is the terrorists' hottest erotic dream. They seek to inflict the maximum death, destruction, and devastation that they can. Because the more horrific the carnage, the greater the number of dead, bodies and body parts for foreign TV crews to put on news screens worldwide, the greater is going to be the terrorist media exposure. And that media exposure to the terrorists is glory. And glory translates into tangible assets. In a world where terrorist groups compete among themselves for resources, whichever group lays lowest at Great Satan America, or America's wannabe Middle Eastern handmaid in Israel, that group will be number 1 and reap the benefits. They're going to gain members, they're going to gain money from Arab philanthropies, and they're going to gain sponsorships from terrorist states. Now, the specific terrorists involved in actually carrying out an attack know they're going to their death. They've already made their choice. They've selected passage into heaven for themselves and their family, with the added personal reward of 72 virgins and a seat at Allah's dinner table. They seek to embrace martyrdom and they want to take you along with them. And that's a genuine threat you face. What you don't know will get you killed. That's the harsh reality which American law enforcement needs to acknowledge, confront, and overcome in dealing with terrorism. Understand, you're going to be facing terrorists who are prepared, well prepared, to unleash the most cunning, savage, merciless, and sustained campaign of terror ever on American soil. And these terrorists, they're way ahead of you. They already possess a game book containing a great number of set and scripted plays, contrived, designed, developed, perfected, and successfully employed in Israel, Afghanistan, Iraq, Europe, and the Far East. And when you think you've figured out what the terrorists are going to do next, they won't. Terrorists and their attacks grow more sophisticated from attack to attack. There's an ongoing evolution in attack and defense tactics and techniques. And the terrorists currently are using tactics that are the result of over 50 years of evolutionary progress. And I'll give you an example. Okay? Time was in Israel that we could look to see whether a man was wearing socks in wintertime. Okay? If he was barefoot, the idea back in 2000 was that he was preparing to enter heaven and needed to be barefoot. Thus, before detonating the bomb he wore or carried, a homicide-suicide bomber simply needed to slip out of his shoes because his feet were already there. Well, bombers at that time all came from religious terrorist organizations. Blowing themselves up for them was an act of martyrdom, and it still is today. And this is a religious act, and it was one performed exclusively by males. Well, not so anymore. Nationalistic terrorist organizations began carrying out attacks which did not adhere to all the religious trappings that were becoming giveaways. From time to time, they even used female homicide-suicide bombers. Well, soon, the non-religious, nationalistic terrorist groups were achieving greater results than were their religious competition. Consequently, over a period of several years, the pressures arising out of the need to be number one resulted in a series of fatwas, those are religious pronouncements, that in essence did away with the need to adhere to any religious tenet which might result in an attack not succeeding. Okay. So here you can see how the actual forces of change were at work in an offshoot of the evolutionary progress and process that I refer to periodically. Now, by comparison, American law enforcement has yet to begin its terrorism tactics evolution and remains on the backside of the power curve. An integral part of the first phase of any terrorist campaign will be designed to take you out psychologically. Okay? The terrorists know you. They know how you think, what makes you tick. And they're going to use their knowledge of you against you. They're going to use the fact that you have never experienced the horror of multiple, continuing, and repeated attacks, let alone that this horror is taking place in your own town or city. And the terrorists will attack especially soft civilian targets, making you justifiably concerned for your own family's safety. Okay? Soft targets are the coffee shop where your spouse has business lunches. It's your children's school, the supermarket a half mile away from your home, your house of worship on a holiday. Okay? I know all too well what goes through your mind when you realize that the terrorist targets are the locations where your family goes about their daily lives. You don't want to leave your family alone, and you don't. Or worse, you go on duty, but you're concentrating on your fear for your family's safety and not on your job. Okay? In either case, you're now a liability. And in fact, the terrorists have succeeded in neutralizing you. Okay? Now, with my wife and two now no longer teenage daughters, I've lived and worked in a terrorist attack environment. I continue to do so till today. Okay? Speaking from my own personal, practical experience, here's what I've done to defeat the terrorists' psychological warfare. Okay? And the counter to the terrorist psyops begins and ends at home. Prepare your family as I've prepared mine.